Welcome. You're listening to My Magical Horse, the podcast, where we are getting curious about animal communication. I am your host, Jordan Banks, and if you are desiring a more magical connection with your own horse, you are in the right place. Join us as we rediscover our sense of wonder, experience the joy, and feel the magic that horses can and do bring to our lives each and every day. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you for spending your time with us. Now let's get started. Welcome back to My Magical Horse, the podcast. Today, I am so excited to introduce Celeste Lazaris. Celeste and I go back quite a ways, actually. Before she even had a name for the balance through movement method, which you probably have heard of by now. And actually met her as my massage therapist. She worked on me. Today, I have her on because I want to talk about animal communication and how her horse, Dragon, helped lead her to developing the balance through movement method, and just little things along the way, how animals reach out to us and guide us. And anyway, just wanted to welcome you, Celeste. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having
And
me.
yeah, and I'm excited to talk to you. Gosh, I think has it been 6 years? I can't even remember how long I've known you now, maybe 6 years.
Yeah.
Because Kevin introduced us, and he had come
Yeah.
up for your wedding. And yeah, I mean, we
Oh,
just
that's
started with,
right.
yeah, that's how and she got married on my birthday, so I will never forget her anniversary, my birthday. But yeah, Kevin said, he's like, you got to meet her. She's magic. I don't know what she does, but she's just magic. And I was having a lot of body issues. So I got in touch with you. You started working on me for quite a while before I ever had you come out to work on horses. But then had you out worked with the horses, and then you kind of just exploded into what you are doing now. And I just wanted to talk about Dragon a little bit because I know that he really has been the catalyst to all the things that you're doing now. And I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit about what that looked like and how it started. I know you had said he came into your life and then he'd leave and he'd come back into your life and he'd leave, and it sounded like he came back into your life maybe in worse off conditions than when he left. And go ahead and just talk about that a little bit and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, going like way back, my what actually got me into body work was my horse Kid. I just lost him this last year. But he had EPM. He got diagnosed with EPM, and he was the one that for like, gosh, I don't know, Beth Ann, actually, circling back to all of our people, Beth Ann's the one that really helped me get the diagnosis because for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, he was dealing with just kind of interesting symptoms. He just wasn't right. And he was a finished horse. He was just super dialed in, very, very well trained. And he just wasn't right. And I kept, asking vets and asking body workers and you name it, like everybody in Washington state that was really good. Like I had everybody out and they, didn't tell me I was crazy, but a little bit. And they were just like, yeah, there's nothing of note. And I'm like, I'm telling you something is really wrong. And again, back then I wouldn't have called it animal communication, but like he was telling me the whole time, like, hey mom, I'm really struggling with my balance. I'm really struggling with this move. I'm really struggling with the canter depart, like things that he never struggled with. And I kept basically just throwing more and more fits. And then Beth Ann and I met, and she was dating a veterinarian at the time, and she worked on him, and she agreed with me that she was just like, I wouldn't call him neuro, but there's definitely like the things that you're saying that he's saying, like I can see what's going on. So I'm just gonna make Sean do an EPM test on him. Um, and he did, and he came back super high. And going through that recovery and that rehab was brutal because I was watching my best friend go. It was like watching him go through chemo, and it was really wicked. But he made it through, and then I got invested in doing body work so that I could rehab him. So he was what started like the body work journey. Um, and then with the Dragon, so the differences between like the body work and BTMM is basically how do we take all of the cool things that we can do in body work, but get the same releases via movement because, we have to ride and train the horses. And in theory, we shouldn't be needing to band-aid them with body work. We should be able to have the ridden work really be the body work. And I was not a I did not grow up with dressage. I didn't have any knowledge that there were classical masters out there that said the same things in that regard. So it was really cool when I got to hear about it. But basically, yeah, I mean, it's just chasing the thing that I think all good horsemen chase. But Dragon did a huge catalyst for me. So I bought him. It's a very poor decision. When it wasn't a poor decision, it was a irresponsible financial decision at the time because I was going through a divorce and he popped up on Facebook, like somebody shared him, and it was this beautiful, registered Andalusian Stallion for sale. And I'd always wanted one. And there was something about his picture that I was like, oh my God, he's so stunning. And people kept sending him to me because he was like very much my type and everything that I loved. And also, the woman that was selling him was going through like a horrific DV situation, a divorce. She was really in a hard way. And I had been through that, and people knew that I'd been through that. So they were like, you guys should connect. I think you'd have a lot of cool things that you can share with her. So we connected. Um, she ended up giving him to me for a steal, but it was still way more money than I should have been spending at the time. And I really shouldn't have been taking on another horse because, again, I'm going through a divorce. Like, this is not this, none of this was an intelligent. I could not tell you how not responsible this was. But anyway, so I get the horse. Her and I end up not necessarily like becoming friends, but I helped her set up with a lot of different like shelters and places that she could, just get support through the situation. So we got her out of the bad situation she was in. I get the horse, and I'm just like head over heels in love with him. I mean, like, just unbelievably in love with this horse. And flash forward maybe like a year or so into it, it just was becoming abundantly clear that like I could not afford him. I couldn't afford to keep feeding more horses. I had sold all of mine except for Kid. Um, and then Ari's mom, Adair, I leased her out to a dear friend of mine and then ended up just giving her to her as well. But so Kid was the only one that I was like, I can't ever sell him. I'll keep him forever. But like Dragon, I'm sorry, like this is just not responsible. So I ended up selling him to a client of mine, and she did good with him, but he was really green and he was a stallion, and she ended up deciding to geld him, which was fine. But the gelding process that he went through, I wasn't there, I can't speak to it, but it was really, really traumatic. And he came out of it like he was the kind of stallion that you couldn't, like, you didn't know he was a stallion. He didn't act like it at all unless you looked underneath him and saw him. You hadn't have no idea that he was steady. He had no behavior issues, he had no hormone issues, he was totally fine. But after the gelding, he really flipped a switch and was pretty psycho. He would just start screaming and pacing and sweating. He was trying to attack other horses. He would try to like breed or attack any horse that was around him. So he had to go into really special fencing. Um, it was pretty wild. And so she had me go out to check on him, and I didn't have any idea what was going on. Like, you hear of like, oh, somebody sells a horse and then they're different. And it wasn't one of those situations. It was very much like something happened to his body during that gelding that is just, and back then we didn't know about gelding scars. That wasn't anything anybody talked about. We didn't talk about nerve pain. We didn't talk none of the things that are more headline today was spoken of back then. And I wasn't at a place that I could take him back, really, especially not with how he was behaving. But I also felt really bad for what she was going through. So I just offered to help him. Anytime I had a day off, I was out there trying to help him. And he got a little bit calmer, but it still wasn't like a good fit for an amateur. And again, against my not judgment, but advice, she ended up bringing him to a schooling show that I was at. It was like a this every year there's like a Halloween gaming show in Washington, and I had brought my barrel horse that I was competing on with a friend of mine, and I was just going to go and do some fun speed events at the unit. She brought him to that event, and he promptly got loose and went around the grounds just trying to mount it. It was absolute fucking chaos.
Holy shit.
It was so bad, dude. It was just, and I'm just sitting there like, and everybody knows that I sold her this horse. So this is making me look like a gem, right? And I'm like, oh my fucking God. So I go and I catch the horse because I'm the only person there that he knows. And so like he comes right up to me and I'm like, dude, you can't act like this. Like, this is not good. And she's like, well, I paid for all of the classes and I don't know what to do. Like, could you just take him in there and like let him have a good experience? And it's one of those moments, again, like just like with animal communication, all of it is about trusting that voice, right? Like that's all it is. And we all know better. And there's not a single time that I've not listened to it that I don't deeply regret it, including this one. And I sat there and was like, no, Celeste, that's a bad idea. You say that she needs to load the horse up and take him home. And now, you know, approaching 40, I would do that now. But back then I was like dumb and in my 20s still. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, yeah, I'll totally. So anyway, I get the horse and we have these slots where like I run mine and then we have a horse in between and then I get on Dragon and I take him in. And he was actually doing really good. Like I would take him in there. I mean, we weren't gonna win anything, but we
For
went
a
in.
gaming show, huh?
Yeah, so we're at a gaming show. So I go in and I'm like rip roaring it on my 1D horse. We have a break in between, and then I would take him in and we would just trot the pattern or walk the pattern or whatever, but just to like get him out and get him exposure. And for me, it was like, and again, I look back on like why was my ego like I'll do this versus not. And it was like, well, because if I do it, I can show people that he's not crazy. And that was always my thing is I had this like thing where I had to like prove that he wasn't crazy because I knew better. Like it wasn't his fault. So anyway, I do this and he's going great and everybody's really impressed by him. And then we were getting ready for the last run and everybody had been really mindful about not bringing their horses around him and I when I was on him because like I could control him but like you still don't want to get close to a stud and even though he'd been gelding like he had turned him more into a stud somehow with the gelding. So I'm on him. The girl is holding him as I swing on him. So she's got I don't know how she had it hooked, but she had the lead rope like hooked over his nose because we had a halter on underneath the bridle, and then she hooked it onto the bit, I think, or she had a chain on it. I don't remember. But she hooked it up in a weird way while she was holding him. I went to swing on him, and another horse came flooring it around and was just acting up. It was going like sideways, like when they start going kind of crazy and they just start dragging the people sideways. So the horse is dragging sideways and throws his or her hind end right in front of Dragon. And I was like, this not good. And I'm on him now. I have swung up and this lady's holding him. And he starts to go a little bit crazy over this horse. I'm trying to check him. And she just, God bless her heart, isn't skilled at handling horses well enough, but she's like yanking super hard on the chain and just bomb, bomb, bomb on his nose. And I'm like, stop doing that, stop doing that, let him go. So that I'm like screaming at her to stop because, and I'm on him and it's not his fault anyway. But she does it so much that it triggers him into rearing straight up. And then I'm like, you need to let go, like stop. So she has him like braced against the rope and then just lets it go. And so he flips over on top of me. My barrel saddle horn, for those that don't barrel race, the horns are really tiny because you don't rope off of them. They're just little itty bitty horns. And it got caught in the panel that was behind us. So, like the things in the warm up arena. So he flipped over on top of me in that corner, and then the saddle horn got stuck in the panel. And so he was stuck on top of me for I don't even know. And everybody was like, she's dead. There's no way. There's no way she's making out of this. And it was such a weird thing because like he came over on top of me and then I just didn't feel anything anymore. I was just like completely shielded. Like looking back is I think what happened, but I was really scared that I didn't feel anything because I was like, this is really bad if I don't feel anything. And eventually he got off of me, but I had a bunch of friends that were watching it and he had contorted himself so oddly to like he was doing everything in his power to not crush me. Like he had put himself, like he was throwing himself on top of his head. Like they were like, we've never seen a horse do the movements that he was doing. Thank God he's hypermobile. But they were like, he was not going to crush you. Like he knew that you were underneath him and he was horrified. And so they got me out. They finally got me out. I snapped my arm in half from the impact, but not from him. So when I went down, like the impact of it just compound fractured that arm. And then, and I had a black eye, but like I should have been dead. So it's a really big deal. So anyway, they take me out. They take me to the hospital. The owner takes him home. I find out this is all leading up to an animal communication story. This is how I get him back. So I go to the hospital. I get out of the hospital the next day. I'm like loaded on painkillers, which I found out at that time I don't do well on. And I just was laying on the couch. I don't think it was the next day. I think it was the day after. And I was laying on the couch, and Danny and I had only been dating like, I don't know, maybe 6 months at the time. And he was over there taking care of me, and I was just sitting on the couch, and I was like, he thought I was like high. He thought I was just the drug stalking. But I was like, there's something wrong with Dragon. I need you to go check on him. And he was like, what? And I was like, there's something is really, I need you to go check on him. Something's not right. Like he's hungry, he's stuck, like his legs can't move, like something, and something really bad is going to happen. Like I need you to go and check on him. And I'm like wigging out. And you know, my husband, like he's, God love him. He like will support anything that I throw at him. But even in that moment, he was like, okay, honey, I think the drugs are a little, he's fine. Like nothing bad's going to happen to him. He's at this place with these people. Like, sweetie, you're fine. And I'm like, no, he's not okay. He is not okay. God damn it. I need you to go check on him. And I'm like having a panic attack about it. And he's like, okay, okay, I'll go check on him. This man has at this point has never put a halter on a horse. He does not handle horses. He's a skater and a musician. Like now he's broke. Now I've broken him. Like he can tack up a horse. He's good. But like he was not at the time. Very green. And I send him out, and he goes out there, and lo and behold, what had happened after the accident is they were like, oh, see, he is crazy, he's psychotic, this is all his fault. He could have, like, there's no accountability for like the situation. Everything is Dragon's fault. He tried to kill her, he could have killed her. We just need to shoot him. So he got loaded into the trailer, and then I guess got the absolute shit beaten out of him in the trailer, to the point that like the guy that was beating on him so bad he finally snapped and bit the guy. And Dragon has never been violent to anybody. And I was like, you must have pushed him really hard to get him into that situation. So that happened in the trailer. And then they took him back home and put him in this like old muddy paddock with like mud up past his knees, which is why I was like, he can't move. He's stuck. Like he can't move his legs. No food, no water, been completely abandoned out there for 48 hours. And then the vet was coming later that day to put him down. And nobody was saying anything to anybody, and they were very much like, don't. And they like, so Danny gets out there, he sees this, and he's like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is he in the situation? What's going on? And they explain, oh, well, obviously he's violent, and look at what he did to Celeste. Like, he needs to be put down, he's too dangerous. And Danny's like, no, no, like you can't do that. And and they're like, just don't tell Celeste. Like, and he's like, do you have any idea how bad of an idea that is? Like, don't tell Celeste. Like, she knows, she already knows. Like, I don't know how she knows, but she knows. he's like freaking out, and he's like, absolutely, and I'm don't put me in that situation. This is like her best friend. So this man, without ever having any experience with horses or halters or anything, he's like, and I'm broke as shit. He's not very well off either in this at this particular stage in our life. And he's like, we'll figure it out. We'll just take him. We'll save you the vet bill. We will take him. He will come home with us, and we will figure this out. And he found a halter, and he went in there, and he put the halter on Dragon, and he somehow figured it out. And he led him into a drier paddock, gave him food and water, and was like, don't touch him. I will be back. We'll figure this out. And I called in some favors, and we figured it out. He came home with me. So that was how I got him back the first time.
First time, right?
And I was like, so it was such a weird thing to sit in that, like that knowing that like when he came back and he validated everything that I was seeing and feeling, because it was like Dragon was sending me pictures. I just kept getting these pictures, pictures, pictures. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not crazy. And now I feel more crazy for the fact that I'm not crazy over that situation. So I didn't say anything about that to anybody. Nobody but Danny knew about that for years. It was like, we'll just keep that between us. And then came the trying to figure out how to rehab his body and his mind. And I hadn't gotten all the way to BTMM and like what that's turned into now, but I started learning about gelding scars. I started learning really more about body work. I started learning about nerve release. And so all of the nerve release techniques that I learned in human school, I would practice on him. And I started getting a lot of really good results. And that was really cool. So he was my like, I just wasn't going to give up on him. I really wanted to help him. So that we ended up moving into that property in Tacoma. And the agreement on the property was that we would get it because it was going to make us money as well, right? Like it was going to help pay for itself. We would have to do, we had to clear everything. We had to rip all the barbed wire out. We had to like create the equestrian center that it was, but it was a lot of work. But once that happened, the agreement was that we were going to make money on property. We were going to board. I was going to take in training horses, whatever. And Dragon was making it like pretty much impossible for me to take on any horses because as soon as another horse would come on the property, like I had his body going pretty good and his mind was okay when it was just us. But the minute a new horse is on the property, he would spin out so bad, and he would just pace and pace and pace until everything in his body was swollen, and he was soaking in sweat, and he'd lose a bunch of weight, and and he would blow through. My God, the amount of fences we had to go through with that animal. Danny laughs now. He's like, I can rig anything for Jurassic Park. And I'm like, he taught you well, like we really had to get good at it. But it was just, God, it was so stressful watching him. And so I was talking to the woman that I bought him from, and she was in a really good place. She was dating a good man. She had horses again. She had a really nice facility that she was out of. And I was just telling her some of the issues that I was running in with him. And she was like, we have a stallion barn where it's just stallions and there wouldn't be any hormones and it's set up for stallions. And my kids love him because they were raised with him. And I think, like if you want, I can just take him here. And then that way you don't have to worry about it anymore. We'd love to have him back. And I was like, God, I love him so much. I can't stand the thought of it. But I also have to I'm a parent, I'm a mom, and I'm trying to like make sure that my kids are taken care of. And I can't have this like weighing financially on us just because I love him. That's not, unfortunately, real life. And so it seemed like a really good option. So we went for it, and I hauled him out there and dropped him off, and I inspected the facility, and it was beautiful and it looked really good. And he settled right in and he was super happy. We went back like 3 months later to visit, and he was super happy and things were great. And I told her, I was like, the one thing is like, he's just not ever going to be okay in an environment with other horses. Like, you just really have to honor that. And so, as long as this is where he's at, it's good. Flash forward, this was a big bonding moment between me and Catherine. Um, Gosh, I don't know. It wasn't quite a year. And I was at Catherine's place for the first time. So she flies me out there to do body work. And this is like a big deal because now I'm being flown out of state. And she was the coach and the show manager for the Andalusian World Cup. Like she's a really big deal. And so I would like to impress the lady and like, be reasonable. And her and I are sitting in a golf cart and we're watching a lesson, and I just get overcome with, I don't even know. Like I just got super scared, I guess maybe. Like there was just a really weird feeling. And I was like, something's wrong with Dragon. And I could feel it. And Catherine's so sensitive, you know her. And I'm sitting next to her, and she just observes that like all of a sudden, I guess I started holding my breath and my body language shifted and things were just different. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh shit, she notices. Like that's weird." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm good. I think I don't know." I was like, I need to check on a horse, I think. And I was like, "That sounds crazy," but and she's like, "It doesn't sound crazy." And she's just sitting there like, "Yeah, no, I get that all the time." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. All right. Well, so I'm getting these sensations and these are the pictures that I'm getting and I just don't really know what to do with it." And she was like, "Yeah, well, why don't you just text the lady really quick?" And I was like, "Okay." So I text the owner and I'm like, "Hey, just checking in, like, how's he doing? And we'd love to come visit soon." And she's like, "Oh, it's so interesting that you're messaging me right now." She's like, "I'm actually, I didn't want to bother you because I know that you're traveling a lot." She's like, "But I actually scheduled to have him put down." And I'm like,
What?
"Is he still alive? Like scheduled or like it's in the future or already?" She's like, "Yeah, no, like in the next couple days." And I was like, "Why? What? Why?" And she's like, "Yeah, he just started losing weight. It's really weird." And I've had the vet out and I've had all of these things and he's just not keeping weight on. And I feel really bad for him and there's just not anything else I can do. And so the vet, agreed with me that this is the best course of action. And thank God this is all via text message. So I'm not, like I get to filter my face and my words. And I'm sitting there like, And again, going back to like animal communication, that I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I sat with it for a minute, and I don't know like who I was asking or what I was doing, but I tuned into my body, and I was like, is that true? And I was like, that's not fucking true. And I said that out loud, and Catherine was like, what? And I was like, it's not true. She's lying. Like, this is not true. And then I tuned in again, and I was like, he's so hungry. He's so hungry. And she was like, and I'm just having all of these like, and I was like, and they were like riding him. And so I messaged her. I was like, did you guys try to like take him out and ride him and do anything? And she was like, well, I did send him to my dressage trainer for a few months because she was so impressed with him, but that's really when he went downhill and he was too, his outbursts were too violent and it was all of these things. And I'm like, I fucking told you that he couldn't be in any other situation. Like, why? I'm like, I just hate humans. I swear to God, they're the most flawed creatures that's ever been on the planet. Like, you had explicit direction what this horse needed. And then you went and did that. And now you're going to shoot him because, anyway. So the real story was her dressage trainer came out, saw him, fell in love with him, thought he was very fancy because he was very fancy and had spectacular movement, and was like, oh, Celeste just didn't know what she was doing. I can totally do this. I can turn him around. And she took him to her training barn and he went fucking psycho and he blew down stall boards and she couldn't ride him and she couldn't control him. And she bit him up and she spurred him up and he had marks all over his body, head to toe. He was like 300 pounds underweight. He looked horrific when I got him back. And she was like, yeah, no, there's just something really wrong with him. He needs to be shot. And so the lady took him back, didn't feed him. So he was starving because he was going to get shot. So you don't need to waste food on him, obviously. And I'm like, what is it with this horse that like it's like he's cursed. Like like if he's not with me, people are going to do stupid shit with him. So I had a huge fit. And Catherine was probably the only reason why I got him back because the things that I was going to say to the lady were not going to be very helpful. So Catherine helped me write these messages where it was very like, hey, I'll save you the vet bill. I love him so much. Like, I really want to say goodbye. As soon as I come home, we'll come over, we'll pick him up. We can put him down here with us. Like, it's okay. So I like didn't say anything bad. I validated her experience. Catherine validated her experience. She, like we made it a very as fluffy and like pretty much manipulative as we could so that I could get him and get him back. And so I get him home and he's just a wreck, and I'm sobbing to Danny, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do because this has to work, but he can't live like this either. And if I have to put him down, then that's fine, but we need to figure it out. But I get to be the one to make the call, not because people abused him and put him in bad situations and blamed him for it. So like, we'll see it through. And I rehabbed him, didn't have any of the horses on the property, just focused on him, got him, happy and healthy again. And then I started bringing horses back in and he started having those episodes. And at one point, I reached out to another friend of mine that also does animal communication. This is before I knew Shaylee. And I messaged her and I was like, hey, I feel like for his well being, like I'm a big quality of life person. And I'm like, I think for his well being, unfortunately, it might be best to put him down just for his mental state. And I was like, I think that this world is too hard for him and he cannot be the only horse on the property. I have to feed my family, but he can't go to anybody else. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that making that decision, but I need somebody else to weigh in on this for me. Can you just check? And she wasn't really a horse person, but she honed in on him anyway. And she was like, is there any way that you can give him like a really heavy dose of painkillers just out of curiosity? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I can give him a whole tube of Banamine and see what it does. And she's like, try that really quick. And so I went out and I gave him a tube of Banamine. And within an hour, he had settled down. And I know that Banamine also calms horses a little bit, but like you could not sedate this horse, like no sedatives. You could do whatever cocktail you wanted. And he was like, yeah, no, motherfucker. But so it wasn't the sedative, it was something about the pain reliever that was in it and it calmed him down. And so I started doing that same like tuning into my body and tuning into him and being like, why does this work? Why is this working? What's going on? And why why do you act like this only when you get hormonal and not another place? Like, what is it? And I'm trying to filter. And the answers that I was getting back was he would be fine, but it was like he would be okay until he would start to get hormonal about something. But that engagement of the hormones would fire on different muscles that would then cause nerve compression. And then he was getting nerve fires and he couldn't get away from it. He just couldn't get away from it. And I was like, God, that makes so much sense because he was gone. He was not, I had so many videos of him and it was heartbreaking. And he would just be not in his body, gone. And it was like the pain was so bad that it would keep him in that loop and he couldn't get out of it until he calmed down and wasn't in that hormonal state anymore. And then the pain would alleviate. And so that's what started honing me in on, okay, so there's a physiological difference that is happening in his body from a like muscle activation or joint. Something in his body is different when he's in a hormonal state versus not. And so something, something's going on there with the muscle. So that then started leading me into like the nervous system work and figuring out how to rehab him. And that's how BTMM came to be. I sat out there and I watched him. God, I watched him for, I can't even tell you how many hours. I would sit and watch him, and I would put him in stressful situations and I'd put him in relaxing situations, and I would just watch what muscles were firing and which ones weren't. And I figured out that when his brachioesophagus was loose and when he was in what I call pillar one posture now, he wasn't in pain. And when he would have a hormone flare, if I took him out and I did groundwork with him and I could get him into the pillar one posture, he would come right back down and snap out of it. And I was like, okay, so I can manage his nerve pain if we practice more of these movements. And the more we practice those movements, the development in his body changed. I know you've seen his before and afters were like the craziest of all. And like watching the shift of his posture. And then I learned that there's a difference between posture and conformation because I thought that that was his conformation, and it was not. It was his posture, it was his muscle development. And seeing the change, and as he transformed his body, his mind transformed, and he didn't have any of those episodes anymore, ever. I had horses on that property with him for years. He was in with other horses. He got to raise Ari. I had him. Everybody's like, you put a baby in with him. I'm like, he was in there with Ari and his mom. It wasn't his baby. He should have killed him. He didn't. He was madly in love with Maze. So Maz Kane was his other friend. He had a horse with him. I learned how to get him into like a herd dynamic. So he had one mare, Ellie, who was like just the love of his life, and she sadly passed away from a really horrible twist colic. And I thought I was gonna lose him then because he like really got super depressed and was super sick. And Maze hated him at the time. And I went out to her and I was like, I think this was, I'm trying to remember dates. I was like, I'm really not ready to lose him. And I think it was around the time of my miscarriage. And so I really like, I knew that we were going to try to get pregnant again. And I had this thing where I was like, I need Dragon to stick around. I know this is selfish, but I just need a picture of my daughter and Dragon. I just need one. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. Where, well, I'm listening. I mean, it's interesting because I knew you were going through all of this, but I actually never actually met Dragon. I mean, I've been to your house, but I never met
Probably like
him.
the saw him out the window.
Yeah. When did you meet Shaylee in, I guess, the time frame of all of this? And also, I guess two questions. I know when I met you, you were the first person to really open my mind about energetics. Like I knew nothing. I knew nothing. Like I I
Yeah, because you
remember
let me you let me read your cards.
I went to your house the first time and you pulled cards for me and I was like, I have no idea
I
what's
am in the
happening right
wrong place.
now. I just came for a massage. But you
No.
did it, I think you did it for me twice. And then I did actually, I think I had you do a reading for me twice after that. But you really were the first person to open up my mind. I mean, aside from animal communication, I had my own like limiting beliefs. Like, so right now I'm taking your Principles of Energy course, which is amazing. And it's interesting because when I first met you, like you knew all these things and you did all these energetic things. And I was such a, I don't even know, I want to say a baby or a novice. Like I had not been introduced to that
Who's
at
that?
all. Like I hadn't been exposed to that world at all. And so in some ways it was a little scary because I was kind of like, what is this? And
Yeah.
two, it also really opened up my curiosity.
Mhm.
Um, and three, I had always wanted to be able to communicate with animals, but didn't think that it was okay per my religious upbringing. And I know
Yeah.
that you have a really strong religious upbringing too, that I just learned from watching other podcasts about you, really. So it's fascinating to me that when I met you and I was introduced to this kind of energetic world, and then I started to look at things different. In fact, even how I trained horses, I would start to see that, and I would actually, I think I put on my Instagram that I'm an equine energy sculptor. That's what I decided because I didn't like calling myself a horse trainer. I don't like calling myself a horse trainer. So I was like, I'm an equine
I
energy
love that.
sculptor. And
Yeah.
then I would find that when I worked with horses, if I just it was experimenting with shaping the energy as an artist because I'm an artist. So I'm like, how can I shape the energy? And it's so fascinating to me because as I've watched you develop your balance through movement method and open myself up to learning more about the kind of energetic work that you do and taking this class, going to the elements of connection, doing a lot of stuff with Amber and Shaylee actually the last year and a half, which is really changed my whole life and my whole trajectory.
Mhm.
Um, Meeting Shaylee actually because you had met her at the clinic in North Carolina, and you were telling me about her. I remember you telling me about her, and I was like, oh, okay. And I talk about this in my podcast with Shaylee, but so I was like, oh, I need to get in on this. I need to meet her. And I still was like not really sure about animal communication though. But my interest was piqued enough that I wanted to meet her. And anyway, one thing led to another, and now I'm just like fully absorbed into this animal communication. And here I am now doing a podcast about basically what I want to do is educate people about what animal communication is, because I know that for a long time I didn't really fully understand it myself. I was a little bit afraid to let myself believe in it. And now
Mhm.
I'm fully like on board and still feeling like I still feel like I'm working through my own limiting beliefs that I can actually do it, although I have lots of examples of things where I was doing it, but it's still hard to believe it. Um, but I wanted to see if you could just talk a little bit about when you met Shaylee, maybe some of the things that she taught you, maybe how did it mesh with some of the energetic work you were already doing? How you've been able to take that and maybe how it's transformed how you interact with horses now. I mean, going from what's happening to, oh, I'm going to lean into this and actually use this. I know you're not showing up in the world as an animal communicator the same way that Shaylee is, but I know that a lot of people can still utilize that gift or that aspect. And I just want to hear about how you're integrating it into what you're doing now and all of the things.
Yeah. I love you're one of the few people that are in my life still that like that knew me like before like before the whole BTMM thing, because it's so funny when I came out for that with that energy course. And I don't think it was geared at me. I think that there's a lot of people, there's definitely like a shift in the world where there's like a lot of people that are really getting into energetic stuff. But Lockie Phillips wrote a post shortly after I launched the Principles of Energy course, and it was like, over here, we're not bored of horses, and we don't need to be energy workers, and we don't need to do these things, and we're just working on our horses. And it was like, he and I are cool, so I don't actually think it was geared toward me, but a lot of people sent it to me. But I thought it was really funny, and it was like there was like a stream of like comments that were going around on like, oh, I just need to come up with something new. And I'm like, no, what's actually going on is I basically got thrown into all of the shit that happened with BTMN, which I love and I'm super grateful. Like I'm not grateful for it at all, but I feel like I have been on like I don't know, like damage control for the last 4 years as this thing has blown up, and I'm trying to like, I had to create a trainer program and a certification program, because otherwise people were listening to a lecture of a master class and then going out and giving BTMM clinics with my name all over it. So I had to create these other courses so that I could have things on my website that says these people are mine, these people, if they're not here, they're not mine. So that there was a reason for people to check it. But that was a lot of work. And it was a lot of work in managing the masterclass. It was a lot of work in all these things that we've done. So I got pulled very deeply into the world of, equine rehab, which again, I love and I'm super grateful. And I'm not saying that, but I was pulled so deeply into all of that in the work that I didn't get to do any of my fun witchy stuff anymore that I used to do. Like when you and I met, like that was my jam. Like I worked on horses on the weekends sometimes, but like my jam was people would come over to my house. I had my magic room. I would sit in meditation an hour before you would show up. I'd make you a custom tea that like my herb said, I want to go in this tea, which is also it's not animal communication, but it's just that communication with that connectedness. I've always been deeply connected. And so like I can hear the waves and I can hear what the ocean's saying. I can talk to my tree outside. Like it's not just animals that are in my head. So like my tea would say like I want to do this, and the mug, the mug would be like I want Jordan to drink out of me, and I'd be like okay. So like the whole hour leading up to it, I was doing these things, and I would create like custom incenses, and I would create custom bath things and custom oils, and like all of it was all this connectedness centered around what your body wanted. So I was talking to you without talking to you the hour leading up to your session. That was my life, and it was so fun. And then we'd read cards, and it was like that was so much of who I was and who I still am, but I haven't gotten to do it in
Mm.
years. And it has felt like very similar to like if you ever pulled a horse from me and said you can't have horses anymore. It's like it's so in me that I was like, oh, I don't like it. But I would do other intentional things like with myself and with my kids. But so to get to do this course this year was so cool to me because I was like, oh, I get to have a break real quick. Like, we're going to talk about horses. We talk about horses a little bit, and I'll use horses mostly as the example for the last lesson. But like, I just get to talk about all the shit I really love and all the energy stuff and all of the things that like shaped who I am and how I've been able to manage the business and how I like how you said, like the lens that shifts in you when you're training because you see the world a different way when you're playing in the energetic realm. It's just like I feel like I've done enough for BTMM that I can go and be a little bit more in this world again, and it feels really good. So it wasn't because I got bored of horses and wanted to play in
Oh,
the energy world. It's because I just wanted to do it again. I missed it. I missed it so
well,
much. And
it's who
yeah.
you are. I mean, I see you as that
Yeah,
because
because you knew me then.
because I knew
Everybody
you
else is like, what do you
before.
mean? Oh, she's getting into this. And I was like, no, I've been it the whole time.
But then again, yeah, and you're the traveling horse witch. Like that didn't come out of nowhere.
No, no.
I mean,
So anyway, so all of that to say, so flash forward, I have the session, I have a clinic at Stacia's. God, what year was this? It was when I was pregnant with Rhythm, so 2021. And I'd heard about Shaylee a ton through Stacia, and she was like, "This girl's the real deal. She's amazing. She's got a wait list up, for ever. Like I really want you guys to meet." And I'm like, "Okay." So, and she seems really cool, and she wanted to bring the horse to the clinic, and I was like, "Why don't you?" I'm huge on trading and collaboration, and I was like, "Why don't you ask her if she would be open to trading with me?" If she would show me some of her animal communication stuff because I'm really interested in it, and I'll give her a free session with Bro. And she was like, yeah, she said she'd be great. I had no idea until way later that this was the first time this poor woman has ever tried to teach her work. She did a beautiful job. I was like, nobody would have known that was your first time. I assumed you'd been teaching that class for years. It was so funny. But yeah, so we met at Stacia's house and we sat down on the couch. She took us through like a chakra opening meditation, just pulled it up on YouTube and we all sat and went through meditation. And then she gave us all a horse. So we all had like a picture of a horse. And then we just had to talk about what came through. And I had never done, like, obviously at this point, I've had many instances of communication. Like, again, be it your body and T and like how I work on humans versus like what was going on with Dragon. And Maze talked to me a whole bunch. Maze is the first one that I heard like a voice in my head versus like just pictures. So I had had a lot of experiences. Like I knew that it was a real thing, but I don't know why this was so different to me, but I like my brain just completely like fell out of my butt. And I was like, I can't do that. That's ridiculous. Like this is everything in me shut down and was like, you can't do that. That's so silly. And because of the energetic work that I knew, like I knew that it was limiting belief. I knew these things. And so like I'm actively trying to like talk my way through it while I'm like having a meltdown over how difficult this task is. So finally I get into it and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. And the specifics were so intense and like this particular horse had like gotten into a wreck going over a jump, but he was presented to me as a dressage horse, so it didn't make sense that it was over a fence, and it didn't
Mhm.
make sense that it was this leg when like everything else was saying this other thing. And I'm just like, but I have to go with it because you have to come up, like whatever comes up, you just say. So I just started listing it all out, and Shaylee, just was super good, like didn't show any nothing on her face. And then I get done, and she's like, "Yeah, no, that's 110% exactly what happened." And I was like, "What? No way!" Just freaked out. It was really cool. So that was really neat. And then later on that day, she was telling me things that my daughter was telling her that there's no way she would know. And that's when I was like,
Before she was born.
before she was born, yeah, I'm pregnant with her at the time.
Wow, yeah.
And Shaylee's like telling me these messages from Rhythm that like there's no way Shaylee would have known these things, but she did because she's talking to my daughter. Because again, animal communication isn't just animals, it's that ability to just connect. And I was like, oh shit, you really are the real deal, because that's wild. And she has continued to talk to Rhythm all these years. They're very close. It's really cute.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, so
So
that's what that happened. And
how
I
did that class, or how did taking that class with her, did it shift anything that you were doing per how you interacted with your horses at that point? Or did you
I
feel
think
like it
it
was just a confirmation of what you were already doing?
Yeah, I think it was just a validation. And then, I mean, for sure, she taught me that it was okay to go in and ask for specifics in like different situations. So, like, I was really good at checking in and being like, is this true? And so, like, I was asking the questions or they were showing me the picture. So it was like kind of a two-way that way versus me going in and being like, so what happened? Like, tell me the story and like get it. It was, I don't know really how to explain it, but the specifics on how she was having me ask the questions and do things was different. Adding to the tool set, I think,
Okay.
but more than anything, really validating for sure.
When you were talking about Dragon in the beginning and about how you would get these like, oh my God, I need to check on him. I had a scenario years ago, I don't even remember how many years ago, where there was a stallion that I used to work with at Carpe Diem Farm. And people that know that farm know what happened with the horses, and that there was like I think 100 horses out on the ranch that they had out in Troy. And one of them was the stallion that I used to compete on when I was really new to the dressage world. Like I was a working student, I was working with this horse, and was really connected with him. Had a dream about him one night that he was in I had a dream one night that I had gone back to my house, like where I grew up, but nobody told me that this horse, his name was Machiavello, nobody told me that he was there. And like I didn't know that he was there in my dream.
Mm-hmm.
And in my dream, I woke up crying. I mean, I literally actually woke up crying because he, in my dream, hadn't been fed.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't been fed, and I was feeling guilty, like I didn't know he was there. I didn't know. Anyway, my point of bringing this up is I just brushed this off as a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I found out I don't know how many years later, that when I had that dream, he actually was starving at that ranch in Troy, that they were not being fed. It was during a period of time where I don't know what was happening, but there was nobody there feeding the horses. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, he was reaching out to me. He, because when whoever finally figured out what was going on, those horses were all very malnourished. It broke my heart to go, oh my gosh, he was reaching out to me. And I had no idea. Like, I just thought it was a freaking dream. Like, I didn't know enough at that point to even investigate like to call and see what's happening with the horses. Like I had just kind of moved on from that phase of my life and anyway, I'm just bringing that up. I don't know. I just kind of reminded me of your dragon story of like only I didn't do anything about it whereas you did. You're like I need to call. I need to make sure he's okay. Now I know. Like now I'm in a way different
Yeah,
place.
I'm sure there were like a billion scenarios before that where little things had piped in and you just, you know, you don't know. And sometimes we find out why and sometimes we don't. And it just is, I mean,
Yeah, I think it's just important to and yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely a shift where people are definitely there's I don't know if it's just the people that I'm surrounding myself with now, but there definitely seems like there is a shift where this type of work is becoming more mainstream than at least it had been, I think. Or am I just am I just
no,
moving into
I
that
think that
realm?
I think that it is. I think whether or not mainstream is the right word, but like it's definitely more accepted and the language around it isn't so scary. And I think those of us that have grown up with like deeply religious upbringings are now at the age where we've kind of unraveled some of that trauma and we've kind of decided like for ourselves what our faith looks like and that everything that they teach in the Bible and everything that Jesus teaches really is just energy work. Like Jesus was just a really fucking badass energy worker. And you hear like I mean I went to Bible school. Like I mean I go back and I'm like, really though, this is all he was teaching. And there are so many different ways to interpret it. If you haven't yet, well, I did that. I put that podcast in the Principles of Energy course, but that podcast between Marianne Williamson and Aubrey Marcus. I just encourage like anybody who's had any kind of like religious like to watch it and to see the way that it's being explained now like and the course in miracles has been around for like since the 80s. I think like it's been around for a minute, but again we have social media and we have influencers and we have big name people that are like doing this stuff and so I think the language around the safety of playing with energy work in relation to faith-based practices has been really a huge shift and why
Hmm.
people are more okay with it. And I mean, like Warwick Schiller's got a huge name and he talks all the time about all kinds of crazy energy stuff. Like he talks more about that than he does horses. You've got, you know, Amber and Shaylee who and their podcast, and it's like, yes, we're all horse people and we're all known for horses, but what makes us good horse people is that we're also in this realm of understanding because again, to me, it's not I don't put myself out there as an animal communication person because I don't see myself that way. Because, like I said, the way that I communicate to them is the same way that I communicate to my food and to my kids and to the trees. And to me, it's just like it's connection. Everything is connection. So, pillar one, the relationship to connection, we take that both from an energetic standpoint into the physical, like how do they translate to the pressure of the halter and the bridle? It's because it's all the same. And it's so hard to explain that to people that it's all the same because if you're not connected to your horse and if your horse isn't connected to you from an energetic standpoint and you're just using the tool, they're not going to be able to feel that finesse. And so any good master horseman that you see, they're going to have that touch because they're communicating to the animal the whole time.
Right.
That's just you can't not see that. So to me, you cannot separate energy and horses. That's stupid.
Well, and they're such good teachers if we open ourselves up
100%.
it, if we open ourselves up to it. On the religious piece, I was going to mention, I think it was Jen Segedi that actually told me about a book called Jesus the Ultimate Shaman.
Nice.
And I read it and I was like, okay, like that was like a little bit of a thing that I needed just to get myself okay with pursuing the animal communication piece.
Yeah.
Um, but
Do you want to hear something really funny? This is something that I brought up as a child. Sorry to interrupt you, but just to,
no.
to help you on this thing.
Uh-huh.
As a child in Bible study school, I was like, does nobody else think this is weird? Is it just me? Okay. So like in Genesis, when Eve eats the apple and the serpent comes out and is talking shit to her and is like, hey, all the like, because he comes and he talks to her a couple of times and he tempts her and then he finally gets her to eat the apple. And then there's like this whole thing. At no point in any of that was anybody like, holy shit, a snake's talking to me. At no point. was that even remotely brought up? You know why? Because it was normal. Because God wants you to be so connected that it's not a big deal when they talk to you. And there's like three other verses in the Bible that's very similar where like an animal is speaking. There's donkey. There's a couple other animals that are speaking, and at no point in scripture does it say, "Holy shit, animals are talking. We should really." They were just like they just would converse with him like it was completely normal. A duh, because we used to be that connected. It's not a magic trick. That's
Yeah.
just connection. And God was 100% fine with it because he created it and he created all of us and we all had that same language. And then as things have changed and we've become disconnected from God and disconnected from ourselves and thrown into the ego, we've all gotten disconnected from language. There's Bible school for everybody. You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that.
So, no, it's not, there's nothing about animal communication in any sense of the word that would be anti God ever.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I guess I'm so grateful, and this is paralleling your experience with Dragon. That my horses, so last year Ugo actually had a ER visit to Pilchuck because he choked on some hay that I gave him. And in that was an interesting thing because I was in the VIP month with Amber and Shaylee when that happened. And then Shaylee and I had a pretty profound session in that month where everything that I'm doing now with this whole My Magical Horse thing, a couple months, maybe a month or two later, the idea for this podcast came in. But it's like the one piece that like I've been knowing, like feeling like, oh, there's something more that I'm here for. There's something more that I'm here to offer beyond being a horse trainer or beyond
Right. Yeah.
being an artist or whatever. And then that month, it was February of 2024, so it's almost been a year. I really got this direction kind of outlined for me from Ugo. Like it was just incredible. It was so amazing and it was so profound. And Shaylee didn't even understand the depth of how amazing this was when she was telling me because she was just sharing me this
Yeah.
message that he was saying and that I had these plans to write these children's books and he actually brought that up to her and I was just my mind was just blown. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's all coming together. I'm starting to understand what my purpose here is." But I think it's fascinating looking at your trajectory with Dragon was to help you develop this BTMM, which is now
100%.
blown up into this amazing thing where you're reaching, I don't even know how many people, hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know how many people you're reaching now with this work, which is just it's for me it's been really fun to watch because I saw it in
You know me.
I saw it in before it even existed and as you started to
Yeah.
kind of play with it. And I should add, I mean, for me when I went to the elements of connection, what attracted me to go to that was because you guys were talking about it being kind of, I don't know what you guys, I think I know Amber said like didn't really know what it was going to be exactly, but there had been something thrown out about trauma and horses that had gone through trauma and humans that had gone through trauma. And you and I had talked about trauma because we both survivors
Mhm.
of trauma. And I guess it was just fascinating for me. I guess I'm going into this piece about trauma because for you being a body worker and listening to humans' bodies,
Mhm.
and then hearing you talk and explain that about horses and the trauma that is input into horses' bodies that sometimes we are just not even aware of
Mhm.
was really mind blowing for me too. Just to kind of reevaluate things that I had been taught. I mean, you only know what you've been taught, but that said, I was originally I don't know what the word to say is. When I first got into dressage, it was under classical principles. And then
Mhm.
later I moved into more competitive, but I always held on to those classical principles, even
Mhm.
when they were not what I was being told to do. Um, I would just be like, okay, that's great. And then I would just do what I was going to do anyway. Like I was never big on side reins. I was never, and I could never explain the whys. Like you came along and started explaining, you kind of started filling in a lot of blanks for me about why instinctively didn't want to do these things. Like, yes, I had been taught don't do them, but I didn't really understand why. I just knew that, you know what, I'm gonna hold on to those principles. I'm not exactly sure why I don't want to shove horses into a frame or whatever. Like I just never could do that. I mean, not to say that I didn't ever get pushed or experiment with it to some
Yeah.
degree, but I always would go back to, no, that doesn't feel good.
Yep.
I need to go back to this space. But I guess the reason I'm talking about this too is just it's just that trauma piece. I'm working with a horse right now, and he reminds me a lot. I'm not going to say his name on the podcast, but he reminds me a lot of Dragon, and he has a lot of trauma in his body.
Mm.
I listened to it was a podcast that Tara did with Amber. It was the first time I ever heard anybody talking about the nervous system. Like I'm listening to Tara talk about stuff, and I'm like, huh, I do that. I didn't know there was a term for it.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting. I do that. I didn't know that this was a thing that people could actually learn about. Like I didn't understand that. And then later I took one of Felicity's classes, the Epiphany class, where she goes in deeper about the nervous system. And I was just sitting there going, oh, like it started to explain stuff about myself. I was like, holy shit, I've been functioning like high functioning freeze state for how many years of my life? Like, it just started to make a lot of the pieces fall into place. Throwing a lot of stuff out here, I guess, because all of these things are so important to the relationship that we ultimately have with our horses. And
Mhm.
per my magical horse, creating this magical connection with your horse, I think we have to be willing to look at all the things that could be blocking that. So, Amber and Shaylee have been great in helping me unlock whatever limiting beliefs I've set on myself due to trauma, due to my upbringing, due to all the stuff. Um, you kind of started introducing me to that even early on when we were in our massage sessions, we'd talk about
Yeah.
things. But now
Things would
watching
come up in your
you,
body that I would be like, hey, do you know that this is
yeah, like you telling me that my shoulder blade was completely strapped down. I was like, what? I didn't even know. I until you told me that, I had no idea that my shoulder blade was completely strapped down. Now it's
it
taking,
was like energetics. And then as you started working on your energetics, it started to let go too, because there are certain holdings that are put there that are muscular. Like I tweaked my neck in a workout. That's a you tweaked your neck in a workout, like there are just legitimate things like that. Not that the other things aren't legitimate, but there are just body holdings.
yeah, not a deeper energetic
Not some
reason.
deeper
This is,
energetic thing. And then
yeah.
there are energetic holdings where something happens to you and it gets stored in your body. Your body takes it there. Like a big piece that happens a lot of the time is your fear. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the book. I have to go and find it. I still have a bunch, like my library is still packed up because I have not built my bookshelf yet. But there's a book, you probably remember it. It used to be in the magic room, but it this lady had gone through, and it's pretty damn accurate on listing out where in your body holds what emotion typically.
Oh.
And it's not to say that it can't vary from person to person a little bit, but as a general whole, like your grief in your fear are pretty close together in your diaphragm and in your psoas. Sexual traumas usually psoas, hips, glutes. If you've been like stabbed in the back, if you've had like a lot of like rejection, you have a lot of pain in between your shoulder blades from, and that's where a lot of the terms that we get come from, because that's where the body will hold it.
Hmm.
And so you'll see certain patterns in the body that like, wouldn't matter how many times we would work on it, it would get, it would make you functional again. We'd take like the edge off, but it would just still be there. And then when you are able to mindfully and energetically work through whatever that situation is and find forgiveness or healing or resolve somehow, then that holding just disappears. It's really cool the way that it's connected. And so both things are really important. And so that's why I'm a big believer in body work as well as talk therapy, because I think that getting allowing your body, allowing somebody to come through and actually touch those things to become aware of it sometimes is the first time that you're aware that you're holding it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to have acute panic attacks, God, at least once a week because I had all of my fear from all of my like the divorce and losing my kids and like all these things that I had my fear was stashed in my diaphragm so badly that it had compressed everything down so it would trip me into a panic attack. And I didn't know that until I was in bodywork school and we went through the diaphragm release. And my instructor was very trauma informed and very careful. And he was like, this will likely make everybody cry if you've not had this done. It might trigger a trauma, like a trauma induced panic attack. So that session we were allowed to do it in private rooms if we wanted, and it was wild, but he released it manually. He was able to like release and create space from my diaphragm, and it was the first time I tried medication, I tried therapy, I tried all kinds of things, nothing was working, and it was the
Mm.
first time in 4 years that I stopped having panic attacks. And then
Wow.
like the ease that that gave my body because of what the panic attacks would do, like the after effects of what the panic attacks were doing to me were so bad, and it was just like it was so freeing to realize that there were ways that you could release this stuff so that we could get through the trauma faster. It's not
Hmm.
stuffed down in your body anymore.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I think we, at least what I've just seen historically as a horse trainer, horses that have some sort of trauma like that or whatever, they just get discarded. Like they
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, I don't know, like get rid of that one, get another
Right.
one,
Right.
because that one's going to take too long.
Yeah.
That one's, don't know why these methods aren't working with it, but it's, something's not right with it. What I was going to say with that horse that I'm working with that has this a lot of trauma, and Ugo has a lot of trauma too. But and it's interesting to watch him. He used to be such a, no, I'm talking about Ugo, he used to be such a busybody, like he just never calm down. And then I've started playing with the pillar one with him. I started putting him on the Surefoot pads. Actually did a session with Rachel Bellini with him, and it was interesting because all his shit just came to the surface, and I'm like, oh my God, he hasn't been this crazy for a while because he'll like get into this zone when he's on the Surefoot pad or when I'm doing whatever with him, just putting him into pillar one or something. But it's really interesting. It's fascinating for me to watch him because I don't know how long it's going to take for him, but he goes into the arena and he just wants to go into that meditative state.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's processing and he's releasing stuff, and he
Mm-hmm.
he looks forward to that time to go in there and just release. I mean, I probably really I need to work with you and Tara with him specifically. I just have been working on my own shit first. It's what I kind of made myself a priority that I need to work through my own trauma first, and then I'm gonna tackle their deeper stuff as far as whatever I can have you guys help me with. But the other horse that I have in training, what I noticed with him is I will do the same stuff with him, and he's been really great. And I even got to where I was getting on him again, but then there would be times where all of a sudden he's got all this anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
The old me would have just pushed through that anxiety and gotten on him anyways. The new me is like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
he's talking to me. He's talking to me. When he starts to try biting me, then I know he's anxious. Like he hadn't been doing that for a while. He's trying to bite me. I need to listen to that. And I think that as a trainer, and I'm in a position right now where I have the leeway to experiment more with this stuff than maybe somebody in a competitive barn like I used to be. Um, but it really just hit me.
Mm-hmm.
It was so subtle. But in my past, I would have been taught just to don't, I would have
Oh
been
yeah.
taught just get on him.
Mm-hmm.
Just get on him. Well, then how am I instilling trust in him if I'm not willing to listen to he was trying to talk to me right there. Like, I'm not ready for this today. Maybe I did it last week and it was fine, but this week it's not fine.
Maybe he
And
slept bad. Maybe
I
something
need to,
hurt today.
huh?
I said maybe he slept bad. Maybe something was
Yeah,
missed today. We don't know. They're not bicycles. We don't pull out the same in the same way that we are. Like we don't pull out the same exact thing every single day. And that's so hard to teach people about horses. They're
yeah.
like, well, this is
And
how my horse is. And I'm like, on Tuesday, they might not be like that on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday.
right.
And that's
And that
okay.
everything's at their pace. I think that's the other really hard thing in the shift almost from kind of the old way to the new way is not having an agenda and allowing the horses to, I don't know. I mean, I'm still struggling with that a little bit myself of, they
Well,
still
so here's where it gets hard is that I love the pendulum swift and switch, and
swing.
I'm grateful that it
Yeah.
has happened, and I'm grateful that we have swung to the other side for sure. But there are instances, and people in the community might not love that I'm saying this, but as a lifelong horsewoman, I will say it. There are instances where they do need to push through some things. And there are instances that we do have agendas, because when you have horses that are in stalls that need to come out and they need to get their feet done and they need to get wormed and they need to go into their paddock, there are certain things that there is an agenda for, and there are certain boundaries around. I appreciate that you're talking to me and I appreciate that you're showing me this. You don't get to put your mouth on my stomach. you
Right.
know like, I appreciate that this didn't feel good to you. You don't actually get to land that kick. Like, I can take a hint. If I didn't take the 20 leading up to it and I finally needed it, fine, I'll take it. But there are the other thing that I see that's a negative effect of the swing is that we're seeing horses that are not progressing at all because people are afraid to push them a little bit. um and it's really no different than kids. Like, we do need to go at their rate. And again, this is where, like, mentoring with an actual horseman is so important for these amateurs that are, God love them, they're listening to us talk about energy and consent. And me, like, that's like the basis of pillar one. And if I need your foot, I need your foot. If the
Yeah.
vet needs to come out, the vet needs to come out. And there is a shift on these. There are exercises and there are things sometimes where we take the horses out for their benefit. And I know that that can be up for debate, but that maybe the horses don't really feel like doing that right away. My mare Sassy, if I ever get the ability to get her dissected when it's her time to go, I would do it, because I don't even want I do want to know the amount of pathology that I am sure is in this mare is unbelievable. And she's the one that came to me that used to, if anybody was lunging her, especially tracking right, she'd be totally fine. And then a switch would flip and she would come straight in on top of you, bite you by your stomach, throw you on the ground, go down on her knees and try to ravage you. I mean, absolute extreme violence.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people aren't around actually violent horses. They're around horses that misbehave. They're not around violent horses. They're two very different things. There are, in fact, violent horses in the world that are extremely dangerous, and they have the ability. And I think that when people don't know that, it's a little bit different. So my standard around how horses, and I hate the word behave, but my boundaries around how I will interact with them and communicate with them, it's the same both sides. In the same way that I would never just go up to them and be aggressive, they may not do the same to me. And in the
Right.
same, if they need me to move out of their space or if they need me to shift around for things, I'm happy to do it, but they need to do the same for me. And so we have a really good mutual respectful conversation around that. But learning those nuances on how to handle those situations is something that comes with a lot of time and a lot of mentorship. And most of these people online aren't getting that. And so they're swinging straight into, we do everything that my horse wants at my horse's pace because this is the essence of good horsemanship. And then their horses are stuck in horrible dysfunction and not progressing at all. So back to Sassy, she has, I don't even want to know how bad her body is on the inside, but when I can put her to work, all of her behavior symptoms go away because her body starts feeling better and she starts moving better and she's in less pain. So like when I was out for my surgery, she hasn't shown any aggressive behavior in a year. She's been wonderful. And I was out for about a month. I couldn't do anything. And she had turnout and she had stuff, but it got to the point that Danny couldn't even turn her out because when he went in her stall, she was trying to attack him because she
Wow.
was in pain. She wasn't getting the exercises that I can give her. And again, that's a conversation too. Like, quality of life. Is that okay? For me, it is. For her, because with the exception of the surgery, you know, I have the time to do that for her and she's good and she's happy and she's my go-to horse for teaching lessons and all kinds of things when she's good. But if I just listened to her and I listened to all of her warnings and I didn't take her through that, she would be miserable. She'd be violent and I'd have to shoot her. So, there's a fine line there. It's also in my will that if I get put down, she either goes to Kiara's husband or she gets put down. Like, it's because I can't have a liability around my kids and I don't want her sent around. But those situations are more common than I think people realize. She's on the extreme side because she's like actually violent. But I see so many of these horses where they would be better off and they would have a better quality of life if the people push them through a little bit more, but they don't know how to push. So it's better to err on the side of listening to them. And also, it would be really good for them to get lessons with people, you, me, Tara, Catherine, people that are experienced enough to read the micro expressions and the nuances. That's the difference between horses saying no and horses saying, I don't think I can, or I'm not
Mm,
sure about this, or maybe I'm afraid that this might hurt. Most horses that have been ridden are afraid that being ridden is going to hurt because it has traditionally hurt. They have been trained poorly. That doesn't mean that when you and I get on, it's going to hurt. But they don't know that, and they're not going to know that until we go through those experiences. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's a super convoluted conversation, and
There's so
it's a
much
hard one
nuance.
to have. There's so much nuance to it, and it's so hard.
Yeah.
But that is as a horseman, that is what I am seeing the shift. And we're seeing it in kids too,
Hmm.
in our God love my oldest son. He's 14 now, just wild. And he is having such a hard time with kids his age because they're just absolutely out of control. And they all go to school in their sweatpants, and they're all going to school with all of their, like, honest to God, like, bullshit attitudes. I mean, they're smoking pot in class, they're doing horrible things, and none of the parents are really doing anything about it because they are gentle parenting their children. And I don't beat my kids. I don't have to. But I have boundaries and I'm kind to them. And I would like to think that I gentle parent them and that I parent them the way that I train my horses. But I also have solid boundaries and I also make them do things that they don't want to do. If my boys would never shower ever, they would never brush their teeth. They would wear the same clothes every day. Years. They have been mine for 14 and 11 years. You would think, no, 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 no. Every day I have to be like, baby, you have to wear clean clothes. Baby, you need to take a shower. You smell. Baby, I love you. You have to eat breakfast. I'm sorry. Like, this is a daily conversation, like, to the point that I don't even know.
Yeah.
But I do it because it's important to me that they turn out to be decent citizens.
Yeah.
And instead it's swung the other way because my generation of kids are all grown up and we were parented shitty, so then we swing and we don't ever want our kids to go through that, but there's a balance. you
Yeah.
know
And the
so
boundaries, like you said, is really important. That's what I see with students that I don't know. I mean, somewhere along the line, when I've immersed myself into this for years. So somewhere along the line, to survive as a horse trainer, you learn how to have boundaries because horses will come at you for whatever reason. You make sure they understand you can do that out there, but you can't do
sure.
that to me, right? Um, and some people don't allow them to do it at all, and then those horses get really shut down. But I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, the boundaries thing. Um, I just think
Important.
that it's important for people to understand that, like you said, I like to tell people when I'm working with their horse or I'm teaching them how to ride their horse that they're their personal trainer for their horse. Like, when you go to the gym, you go to the gym and you say you hire a personal trainer, it's so that you don't do the exercises incorrectly and A, hurt yourself, B, just be not doing the muscle groups that you thought you were trying to do. So I just try to coach my students that, like, you are your horse's personal trainer. They are not necessarily going to know how to put their body in the
Yeah.
correct place. We are not going to force them to do it, but we are going to help guide them into a more proper posture, more correct way of going so that they can learn that that's actually easier than what they were
Well,
offering.
yeah, and to circle back or close up or however you want to call us, but like going back to Dragon and how he started this whole thing. Like, if you and I give this example a lot when people are like, yeah, but how do you know, like who are you to say that, like, the horse should be doing something other than what they want to do? He was living in chronic pain and dysfunction the majority of his life. And it didn't matter the training that I did, it didn't matter all of the body work and the Beamer blankets and the injections and you name it, he's had it and none of it worked. And he himself was not going to put himself in the posture that he was sound in. I would watch him fall into it, and I was like, oh, look, he's sound. And then I would watch him and be like, what muscles are firing? What position is he in? What is he doing so that I like how can I replicate this? That's all I was trying to figure out. And so he would find it on his own, obviously, because I would see it, but he wouldn't stay there for like hardly ever on his own. He was like
Right.
hurting himself over and over and over again. So this, and humans do the same shit. Like, how many super fit, balanced, very good mobile humans do you see? You don't see very many of them. You know why? Because it sucks. I don't like waking up at 4:30 in the morning to work out before my kids get up. I hate it. I'm not a morning person. I'm a night person. But I can't be a night person because I have children. And my body is not great, but I am at least functional. If I don't stay functional, I'll be in a wheelchair. Like my nerve pain is that bad. And so I have to do things that suck, that are counter to anything that I want to do, to the counter to the things that I think feel good in the moment, so that I can be a functional person. And so for him, I had to go out there and put him in that position and work him 10 minutes twice a day, 15 minutes twice a day, 20 minutes twice a day, working on building this up. And then he was more sound. And then his brain calmed down because he wasn't in chronic pain.
So true.
So, no, the horses are not going to just magically know what's best for them.
Right.
Like, that's ridiculous. They do to an extent. And again, that's the nuance of like, if I went out there and I was like, hey, let's try this exercise, and he was telling me this is making me worse, my behavior is getting worse, my lameness is getting worse, like things are getting worse while we're doing it. Yeah, he knows better. We should listen to that. But that's different than saying, oh, well, he's not doing it on his own, so it's not good for him. Those are two very different things. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
And that's the problem with humans. It's like you gotta understand those are two different things. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just wanted to comment on the pain piece because I ended up getting my own really chronic pelvic floor pain like
Yeah.
a little over a year, I don't know, 2 years, I don't know, 2 years ago. And I'm not sure how long. It took me a while to work through it. And
Well, you
then
were starting to deal with that like back when I was working on you. I remember you were honing in on some of
was
that.
I thought that
Yeah.
came later. Anyway, well, I ignored it until I couldn't ignore it anymore because one day I was walking down the barn aisle and I basically keeled over and I was having spasms um that I was in so much pain. So that is really what made me start to address my own trauma healing because had that not happened, I don't think I would have taken the time to revisit the trauma itself and figure out what I need to do to heal and move past it. That
Mhm.
said, I got to a point where I was doing pretty good, but then anytime like certain things kind of trigger that issue, it's amazing how fast the pain can come back.
Mhm.
I'm shocked at how fast the pain can come back where you think you're fine and then all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, I guess I'm not fine. And so I'm still working through that of just, figuring out ways to breathe and figure out ways to stretch and figure out ways that I can alleviate that chronic tension pattern that I'll get that's very activated by the brain.
Well,
Interesting.
yeah. Well, I mean, and there's more, there's like, I don't think there's any studies about this with horses, which is so silly to me, but there are studies about this with humans. And this is again, this is what I was watching and observing with Dragon is when he was sound was when he was calm, but it wasn't that. All of it was the nervous system all along. So
Yeah.
when he was in the sympathetic nervous system, when we are in a sympathetic state, we are firing different muscles than we fire when we're not in a sympathetic state. That's why things are triggered by your brain. So if you get anxious, you're going to fire on a different set. So for him, he would get hormonal and anxious, and his psoas would seize up and it would clamp over that all of those nerves going down sciatic all the way down into where his testicles used to be. And the minute that muscle would over that, all of his just, his brain would fall out of his body. Same thing for up in his neck. And so when it was such a beautiful balance because we developed his body to be stronger in the sets of muscles that he would activate in the parasympathetic so that it was more normal to him because whatever set of muscles you're most developed in, that's what your body wants to use to stabilize. So for him, he was developed in his sympathetic muscles. So that's why he would trigger so quickly because that was normal. The minute something would happen, he would go into his normal muscle set. When we swapped those and he was more developed in what the parasympathetic housed in, he didn't he wanted to go into that more. Right. So, and it's the same thing for humans. If you're really tight in your psoas and you're really tight in your scalenes and you have these really tight tension patterns in your body, really tight in your thighs, you're going to be more triggered to sympathetic because your body wants to go there. Versus if you're more open and you're more mobile through your hips and you're more open through your chest and you're more open and relaxed through your neck and your throat, you're not going to be as stressed out because your body is not going to go to that place. So there's a lot of science around it for humans. Same thing for training. So people that are doing like big weightlift training, it's depending on what they're doing. Sometimes you'll see them like, and they'll yell and scream because they want to recruit everything to do the big
Right.
things, right? Because that's what recruits the whole body. Versus when you're doing more like yoga or Pilates or more regular flow, a big thing with that is like, are you relaxed? Are you breathing? Are you relaxed? Are you at ease? Because otherwise, you're going to not fire the muscles that those exercises were intended for.
Mm-hmm.
It's also what my big beef is on every fucking equine exercise book that's out there because they're like, just in these 65 exercises, your horse will have a perfect top line. I'm like, that's garbage. That's garbage because the horses are going around over cavaletti and around in circles and they're falling in and they're stressed out and they're upside down because they're in the sympathetic because nobody's taken the time to tone their nervous system first. None of that's all that's going to do is strengthen the wrong muscles. That's stupid. So
But yeah, I mean, like you've said, like if they're compensating for something, it doesn't matter if you put them over ground poles because then you're just going to strengthen
you're just going to strengthen the
the
top.
dysfunction, right? So I am just I love everything that you have done. I love how it has it's filled in a lot of holes, explained things to me that um I guess I function better when I understand how things are why they're
Oh
working.
yeah.
When I understand the why, it makes it make more sense. So I always try to teach that way too. Um, but anyway, what you're doing is just phenomenal with the horses and the number of people that you're introducing this to is just great. The principles of energy class is amazing, and
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you're going back to that piece because I know for a while you're like, oh, but this stuff is all scientific. Like what you're doing with the BTMM has science backing.
I had to really be well, and because I was in front of universities and vets and constantly people trying to tear me down, like there could be no fluff.
Yeah.
It had to be like as sciencey as I could make it, and I appreciate that, and I do love the science, and I think that that's good. And I'm a fucking witch, yo. Like I want to play with
Yeah.
my witchy stuff.
I love that you're bringing that piece back in.
Thank
And
you.
per back to the just we'll wrap this up here in a second, but do you have anything else you want to add or I always like to ask like if people just had one thing that you would recommend that they do to improve the connection that they're trying to develop with their horse, what would you ask them to do or what would not ask them, but what would you would you guide them to do?
Honestly, I think the best place for people to start is that very first lesson of intentions that I have in the course. And so it has nothing and everything to do with horses, but it has everything to do with like cleaning your mind out a little bit because so much of the time we're going on autopilot and we're not taking the time to be like we're either on autopilot or we're living in the past or we're living in like fear of the future. So that's kind of like the stream that's going on through your brain all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like that when you're out working with your horses. And so if you don't have a grip on that and you're out working with your horses and you're like thinking about the past, you're thinking about the future, or you're like having anxiety about these things, you can't connect, you can't be in that place with the horse because you're not actually there. You're not there. You're not present. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot. But so the exercise that I have all of you guys do is to just practice being intentional or just putting your intention on something. So taking the time to like pick something up, or like looking at a flower. It's like I have, I've got some old roses here. And so like taking the time to look at it and seeing like look at all of the different colors in it, look at all of the different like veins that are through it. You can feel the texture, feel where it's soft, feel where it's hard, and like picking something right there in front of you that you're really like noticing and being intentional about like every little detail of that thing. Flowers are great. I talk about like when you make food, you make a cup of tea, when you make a sandwich, like thinking about like how everything looks and feels and smells and tastes and just being super intentional with it. Because what that does is for that moment, it pulls you out of the forward back thing and it puts you into the presence in a way that's not like, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to meditate, my eyes are closed, and I'm present, I'm present, I'm present. It's like, you just give yourself something to do. And you can do that with your horse. You can brush your horse and just notice all the different hairs, notice the different colors, notice the feeling of it, notice the textures, notice how they're breathing, notice how they're blinking, and take the time to just focus on like one or two really, really small things for a minute. And it makes you practice being truly present. It calls you in. You can do it to trees, you can do it to grass. Like there's no limit to it. And the more you practice that, the more somebody explained it in a way where like, so like the moment that I was like looking at the rose petals, it swapped out for like some bullshit that was just on autopilot in my head. So like you can only house so much. So when I take the moment to do that, it swaps something. So I dumped something that I didn't need and I put this in it. And I'm like, that's way cooler. So I do that as often as I can. And over time, what you'll find is your depression and your anxiety tends to go down a lot when you do this kind of exercises because you're swapping out all of the things that are keeping you down and trapped. And it's making it so much easier for you to be in the moment so that you can connect to things easier. Um, and then it ends up
including the
being just kind of how
horse.
you live your life, you know, like I don't pick out earrings without doing that, and I don't, you know, brush my hair without doing it, and I don't, like, every little thing that I do has moments of that intentionality into it, and it just like, I don't know, I think it helps a lot. So that's the number one thing that I have people do, and it changes who you are as a horseman because you're more present, so you notice more things. So you notice more of those subtleties and the little nuances that your horses are trying to tell you because you're available to pick up on it versus, you know, being out there.
Yeah, I love that. That's really beautiful. I'm one of those people that struggles in meditations to
Yeah.
keep my brain just quiet down.
Yeah. And
But
that's like the two big things for that, right? Is like practice doing the intentional thing and then practice just doing like when you're doing meditation, when you're having a hard time, like just go through your senses. Just doing that, like coming back to your senses meditation where you're like, okay, because it gives you your mind's gonna think involuntarily the same way that your heart beats. Like it's not gonna stop, but you can direct it. And the easier you can to direct it, the more you can slow it down. But it takes a lot of practice to learn to control it, but your mind is really, really, really trainable. Like so trainable. And it's so important to be really careful about what you listen to and what you watch. That's why I don't watch the news. I am only on social media to post something and then I'm back off. I have no idea what's going on with anybody unless they text me. Like I have really like tunnel vision because I don't absorb anything that can distract me from the life that I'm in,
I love that. That's a
which
good.
is different than toxic positivity. I'm definitely not positive all the time, but I
True.
am careful about my input for sure.
No, that's good advice for sure. How can people find you if they have not yet heard of BTMM?
My website, balancedthroughmovementmethod.com or Traveling Horse Witch on Instagrams or my name on Facebooks. I'm
Okay.
probably mostly active on Facebook because I like to write like big pieces and I can't fit them all in an Instagram post, and that's very sad to me. But I am on Instagram sometimes.
Okay, cool. And you have the Lazaris sport horses too, don't you?
I do have that, yeah. So if you ever want to like come and see my ranch or like do training or lessons or anything like that, it's through that one.
Very cool. Well, thank you for spending your time with us today.
Of
I know
course.
we kind of it covered a
We
lot
went
of
all over the
ground.
place.
We're all over the place.
So good.
But hopefully whatever people need to get out of this, they will get. So,
The one follow up that I'll end with that intentionality thing is that when your mind's really busy and you're not present, you can't hear your yeses and your nos either.
okay.
And so, you know, to end with the animal communication, or like the way that I would turn it is like be just being connected so that you can hear your own guidance, your whether it's your own God, angels, universe, whatever you want to call it. If you want to hear the trees, if you want to hear the weather, that's the best thing that you can do to calm things down so that you can hear that, because that place is where you're going to get all of your information from. And there's like no better way to live. Like I can't imagine. Dude, my kid got busted the other day. My middle son, Lucius, feeds at night. And he
Yeah.
went down and he was in a hurry and he threw hay for everybody and he missed one of my horses. And I was up cooking dinner and I was like, "Did you feed everybody?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Are you sure that you filled Karma's hay bag?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Why does she say that she's hungry?" I was like, "Because she's real pissed that everybody else is eating and she's not." And he's like, "How how do you know that?" And I was like, "Get back down there and double check." And he went back down there. He did fill the hay bag, but he forgot to put it in. And it was just like shit like that happens all the time. So my poor kids, they're hopeless, but it is, it's handy.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome, Celeste. Well, thank you for spending this time. And I know we could probably talk for hours and hours, but we'll just have to save that for another episode some other time.
you're
So,
good. Well, and you just need to come visit me. So, all
yes, and I need to come visit you. Thank you.
right, love you.
Love you too, Celeste. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Be sure to check out the show notes on how to find out more information about Celeste's balance through movement method, including her Lazaris nerve release technique and her principles of energy course. If you'd like to join the My Magical Horse community, go to www.patreon.com/mymagicalhorse. We look forward to seeing you there. Until next time, namaste, friends.